Today we're exploring another variety that you carry at cucumbershop.com. It's one that has an interesting story. I'm hoping I'm not going to mess up the name. Cucumaro de San Donato.
Yeah, so you got the name just about as well as I would because I don't speak Italian either, but I'm sure those who do will gladly help us out. So I'm sure they would gladly. Cucumaro comes from there's portion of Italy that actually spoke Greek back in the day, and they continue to speak this ancient dialect of Greek, a number of small towns, and San Donato is one of them. And so that where that name Cucummaru comes from. It means like cucumber, but it's an ancient Greek word for cucumber. This variety I've been working on for quite a while. I worked on it for about 3 years. I finally got it to where it's an acceptable place. So this was once like this really highly prized immature melon, historical variety. It's been the focus of both a lot of trade in back in the day and some recent and past jealous slander. So what it looks like is it's this cylindrical light cucumber melon with these dark splotches, dark green splotches, like stripes, but splotches, similar to the we just talked about the Fukusa, but it's very similar in coloring to the Fukusa. My most recent population wasn't bitter. Bitterness can occur, and that's part of what I've been working on taking out of this variety. It's beautiful, and it was once came from this town called San Donato de Lecce or Lecce, which is in a little valley called Valle della Cupa. And so the most recent strain was stewarded by this guy named Mario. And in keeping with the tradition, Mario generally would grow these from March to April and then harvest them in mid May. And these date way, way back. And back in their little town of San Donato, they would grow squash and other things, but they were known for this cucumber. When they were ready, when the fruit was ready to pick in early May, farmers would go around the countryside around 3 a.m. to bring in the harvest into the town square. And then each morning there'd be this impromptu market that would attract buyers from all over the province. And so this was like this morning routine that like all of a sudden this quiet town just became this hustle and bustle and stuff. These wagons, motorcycles, bicycles, people talking, and within 2 hours it's all done. And then the vendors who came, they go, and then the farmers return back to their work. And in addition to the markets, there was this fair held every year in May, and where the cucumber is part of the main focus, this little Cucummaru. And so while it was known for producing the large quantities of cucumbers up until the 1950s, they continued to be important to the economy until the 1970s. And so there's this kind of depression in this basin that kind of makes the soil really good there, and also probably makes it so that they can grow earlier in the season. And that's why they were partially so popular, was because people could get high quality cucumbers real early in the season. So fast forward now, there was this controversy, this recent controversy back in 2016. The Lecce News reported that the residents of San Donato were upset about something to do with the term Cucummaru. So even though it's okay to call a cucumber Cucummaru, apparently this guidebook referred to the citizens themselves as Cucummaru. While San Donato was known for these fruits, a long time ago, the peasants from the neighboring towns would use slander and called the residents themselves Cucummaru or Cucummari, which means cucumbers in the local dialect. But in Italian, calling someone a large cucumber is associated with being gullible, naive, or stupid. So it's this derogatory term that the guidebook used that understandably offended the community. So the mayor was outraged and demanded that the publication be withdrawn. And in addition to publicizing the issue on the social media, the residents urged the administration to take legal action against the people who made this false claim. They need to protect their city's image. So there you go, some kind of controversy over cucumbers of all things. Yeah.
What is it about this variety that made it so sought after versus why are other things people are growing not preferred? What's so unique about this?
As far as I can tell from the history, it was a real high quality variety at the time. I'm getting it to higher quality right now. I'm working on, but the color, it was just really well known, and it was people bought it because people bought it all throughout the province. Then, as soon as the sellers vendors ran out of it, they headed back to San Donato to get some more, and it was early. A lot of the other immature melons and cucumbers, they were available maybe later May, June, but this was available right at the beginning of May, where a lot of people are like, I'm ready for a taste of summer. And in this area, they're particular. They don't prefer the regular cucumbers over these. And as soon as you get these immature cucumber melons, they really want them.
You're talking about improving this variety. I know sometimes it's tough for you to get seed, or that seed goes a very long route to get to you. What's the story behind this seed? So you must have got a, maybe not the right word, a degraded version of it, yet the true version, and you're trying to improve it here in the States to get it back to its former self. Is it just that hard to get the perfected seed from Italy, or does the perfected seed in Italy just not exist anymore?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. Honestly, based on all the information that I have, it's probably not around anymore the way it used to be. But there's some older growers who happen to have it, and this was actually put on the registry of protected varieties. It's called PAT. I forget what it stands for exactly, but this registry of these protected heirloom varieties, this was one of them because it has a story to go with it. But it took me a lot of years to get it. Oh boy, it was a long time in going. So first I asked,
Before you even, how'd you find out about it and where you should even get it?
yeah. There's this website called Biodiversio. So it's this organization I think it's through Barry, this organization through the agricultural department of the University of Barry, that has this kind of goal or aim to be able to preserve these heritage varieties and seek them out, find them, preserve them, and put them on this list of registered varieties to protect that are important throughout Europe to protect. And while they're looking for these, one guy happened to be like, "Hey, I've got these," and so they went and saw him and saw, hey, they're growing, and they match the description, not 100%, because some of them go off a bit. It's like a lot of things. We get introduced with all these new great cucumber, different vegetable varieties. And then the old heritage varieties, they fall out of favor, not because they weren't good, but because maybe something's more productive or can deal with the rain better or whatever. And so this one was not taken care of very well. And is a lot of heirlooms, what happens with heirlooms. And then when people come back to it, then they're, oh, this wasn't very good to begin with, not because it wasn't very good, but because people didn't select it properly. They didn't do the work to do the proper selection. Instead, they just kept it going instead of saying, oh, we're going to select it for these specific traits that made it good to begin with and made it really marketable to begin with. They're not selecting for that as much. And so that's what I've been up to. Yeah. And there's actually a process to take the bitterness out. So melons are generally bitter free, but that's just a genetic thing. All those stressors that would go on that a regular cucumber would go through, like drought or heat or whatever, it would make them bitter. Melons usually don't, unless it's a genetic thing. And if it's a genetic thing, then the bitterness is bracingly bitter. It's really bad. So I just start them out from the little plants, and then I start tasting the leaves, and the most bitter ones I take out, and then I go up and I keep roguing, pulling out plants out of the population that are more bitter until I have a bitter-free variety. I did that for a couple generations, and for about three generations actually. And then currently all the fruit is not bitter, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't be. And yeah, but yeah, it's a work in progress, this one, but it's good enough to share currently because I've worked on it for 3 generations.
And you can do that by tasting the leaves of the plant?
Yeah, so there was a study done, I can send you a link to it if you'd like, where there was a concern over these Armenian cucumbers because in the local area, the Armenian cucumbers. Some were bitter, some weren't. And they were like, we want to find out how to keep them from getting bitter. How can we take this out of the population? And they found out that if there's bitterness in the fruit, that bitterness will also be in other parts of the plant. Hence, you can start from a very early age of the plant to start tasting the leaves and tasting the different parts of the plant to determine if it will most potentially be bitter. And yeah, that's how you worked on removing it. Yeah.
That makes sense. It's really interesting. And I'm assuming here, when you taste bitter versus less bitter or not bitter, it's a noticeable difference on the bitterness spectrum. Or is this like super subtle wine sommelier acquired palate to taste this bitterness?
So when you're dealing with regular cucumbers, when you think about bitter, you're like, oh, I could just peel that off. No, this is it's bracing. And so, yeah, it's pretty easy to tell. Yeah, so I'll just leave it there. There's a lot to it, but currently my population is not bitter. So that's the important thing. And yeah, I worked on getting this variety from the main professor over at the University of Berry several times. I worked on getting it from these organizations that had it, that I knew who had it, and no one would even give me the time of day. And then I have my friend Angelo. My friend Angelo, he's a friend of Giuseppe and I. So I have this kind of relationship with some of these gentlemen. And this friend Angelo, he started this group back when blogs were a thing. He started this group, Amici de Orto, or di Orto, and that means Friends of the Garden. And so he has a lot of contacts. And so I worked through my friend Giuseppe. I said, hey, ask Angelo. And it was a long shot. And it just so happened like late 2019, early 2020, he just happened to send some seeds to Giuseppe. And so Giuseppe sent those seeds to me, this variety and another one. And man, I had to do some stuff to get them to sprout properly. Use some this special technique to get them to sprout properly, but got that done. And they eventually sprouted. And then now I have them, and I've got
Places after a few generations. Yeah, that's so cool.
yeah.
That's the thing I love about a lot of what you have for sale on your site. It's not mainstream, and that's not to say there's anything wrong with mainstream.
Oh yeah.
But these unique varieties all have these unique stories, and you're growing history, you're growing things that were super important to a given population in a given region for hundreds of years. And now you can cultivate that in your own community and share it with your family, friends, and relay those stories on. And it keeps the past alive. It keeps the genetics going. So really cool. Cucummaru de San Donato, available at cucumbershop.com.